Well, thanks everybody for coming here this morning. I know it's an early start, and we're excited just to continue these healthcare entrepreneur meetups, where, as JC mentioned, really we just want to help continue to make Atlanta the place to start and grow a health IT business. There's so many great resources here, and the more we can connect with each other, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're a startup, you're a vendor, you're an investor, connecting in that is helpful. So that's what we're going for here. And we want to thank Bird Blitch, CEO and co-founder of Patientco, for joining us here today. And just doing a little Q&A, probably in 3 areas. Just a little bit of Bird's background we'll start with. The Patientco story, how he got into the idea, what he learned from that. And then lastly, just some reflections on entrepreneurship and healthcare in Atlanta in general, and how to connect the dots there. So with that, I'll start with, made a great choice to go to Georgia Tech. I'm a fellow Yellow Jacket, so obviously I'm a big fan of that choice.
Where are people out here? Yep, all right.
There we go.
Jackets.
That's right. So, as you went to tech, coming out of tech, just how did you think about what you wanted to do, and was entrepreneurship or healthcare even a part of your thought process coming out of Georgia Tech?
Well, can I stop and just go one step back?
Sure.
And do you know where I'm from?
No, why don't you tell us?
Okay, so where would be the oddest place in the world you could be from if you went to Georgia Tech? Wait, I heard it. Athens. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Athens, so people think I'm crazy, but no, for real, I think at an early age, I was trying to think through career and all, do you ever know all those answers to those questions? No, but I felt like the world was increasingly moving towards technology, and when I looked at schools, I felt like, Georgia Tech's right here. And I remember talking to my brother, and he was showing me how the schools rank tech engineers coming out, usually number 1. And he said, hey, this is a great place to go and start a career. So that led me to Georgia Tech. Found that to be a really hard but good education. Georgia Tech taught me how to think and how to manage a calendar. I was never not busy at Georgia Tech, and I made some of the best friends in my life there as well, because you're in the trenches working really hard. Some good days, some bad days, and I think that creates a lot of grit that is really needed from an entrepreneurial perspective. It's life isn't easy, and Georgia Tech taught me a lot along that path as well.
Sure. So learn some of that grit and skills there at Georgia Tech. Was there a thought to eventually become an entrepreneur one day or right away, or how did you think about entrepreneurship?
So my dad was an apparel manufacturing entrepreneur. So back in the day, Georgia was big, particularly before NAFTA, any policy wonks out there, around apparel manufacturing. And in fact, he then got into the retail side of that, and still has a store in Tallahassee, next to the Publix. But just being around the table, I think sometimes, as much as when you're a teenager you want to get away from your parents, some of that just started to seep in. And I remember I always kind of felt called. I loved reading about Sam Walton growing up. It was just amazing how he took something that was a need that needed to be met and made that. I can remember driving with my dad across some Georgia highways, and bugs are hitting the windshield, and a couple of business trips, and I just listened. And so I think that got built a little bit into the DNA. And then, I had to make some decisions. Was I going to go be a big company guy or fight it out? And this was before any of these type, I think, groups existed to help facilitate entrepreneurship. And I can remember sitting there in college and just putting on my computer, and I always kept it on ever since. I said, I want to create the future. I don't know where that is or where that goes, but I want to create the future. And I felt like that was interesting enough for me to keep wanting to take the next step and the next step. All of our steps in life are probably a bit fortuitous. I left Georgia Tech and got into the telecom industry because, again, policy wonks. There was the McCain something Telecommunications Act, John McCain, and they were deregulating telecommunications. So you had CLEX and ILEX and BLEX, and they split AT&T up, and so you had Bell South. and all these different groups competing, and data and internet, and then wireless was coming along, so it was just a mess. And I went to work for one of those companies because I wanted to get the hands-on engineering. I felt like that was a good time of my life to continue to develop hard skill sets, because knowledge is power. So along that path, so my roommate at Georgia Tech, to back up just a little bit, played baseball. His name was Brandon Hensley. We were roomed together for 3 years, and I got to know some of the different baseball players there. And when I went to my second job, I came back to Atlanta from RTP, and I started working for a company called Cable and Wireless, which was a London-based telco. You probably never heard of it, but they were really getting into compete for telecom services. And I was on the retail side as a sales engineer. So I'd moved over from engineering, where I'd started at Verizon, into the sales engineering role. I always felt like I had some of the interpersonal skills to be successful there, but I wanted to keep developing my hard skill sets. And in this opportunity as a sales engineer, I could apply that. And the person next to me was in an office. He was on the wholesale side, and his name was Andy Monin. And he was a baseball player at Clemson. So Clemson and Georgia Tech historically are like top 5 programs. And when you're growing up as a top baseball player, you're gonna, I don't know, Mark, are there AAU teams or Cobb County, and they all play a lot together? And so you get to know some of these different players, even though you go to different teams. Well, lo and behold, Andy Monin was the catcher for Clemson, and Brandon would get up there in all the ACC contests, and he'd be batting, and they got to know each other a lot growing up and in college. So it was a natural introduction for us to build a relationship of trust, and we started a company called BroadSource. And there was the path to my entrepreneurial ways, and I will tell you, it was always challenging and always hard, but always fulfilling.
Great. Well, let me pause there. We'll get to BroadSource in a second, but you talked about learning those different skill sets. A little bit of sales, a little bit of technology, and obviously, as an entrepreneur, you've got to be a generalist to know enough to be dangerous across a lot of those. How did you think about what level of depth to go for each, or where to be a sort of a major, minor? How did you think about which of those skill sets were most valuable in your journey?
Well, I just felt like my first 3 to 5 years was going to be all about learning as much as I could about how the internet works. And so, again, when I was in college, I remember building a web page, and Netscape was brand new on the scenes. And I don't feel that old, but looking back on that, it was, how does this work? I really wanted to understand as an engineer how it all came together, how the data flowed, how the bits and bytes worked. And so I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be naturally inquisitive, because you want to get to the answers under the questions that you have, and you just got to keep peeling back the layers of the onion. So I simply said telecommunications is a growing field. I don't know that I ever said I need to stop here, but I did try to go through and get things like Cisco certifications, and I went to a big company, which was Verizon, which did a lot of learning enablement, and I felt like I got pretty good about being an expert in how the network works to move video and pictures and data, to the point that I could explain it and help sell it. And so I don't know, I ever had limits. I just wanted to try to learn and understand, which is a little bit of an engineering mentality.
Sure. And I think that natural curiosity to want to learn and be an expert in something, right?
Yes.
It's tremendously valuable.
I think anytime as an entrepreneur, I never want to be in the selling mode, even though I'm always trying to quote unquote sell. I want to be in the education mode. I want to be in the knowledge sharing mode. I want to be in the helping someone get better mode, because I just taught them something that they didn't know. And to do that, you've got to have expertise, and you got to be really confident in what you're talking about, so that you are checking those boxes.
That makes a lot of sense. So before we get into the Patientco story, maybe just on BroadSource a little bit for the audience, quick sum up of how you got it as you started getting into it, what happened, what you learned, and then we'll sort of transition to Patientco.
I'll try to make that quick. There's a couple of lessons there, but here I am at Cable and Wireless. The guy in the office next to me is Andy Monin. I felt like I understood a little bit more about how the procurement and sales of and delivery of telecommunications worked, and he was more on the sales side. So we were a natural team, and it just kind of happened. Before I knew it, we had quit our jobs, raised $0, not really tested product market fit, and gone off down the road, because these were the days where almost you put your business card out and people say, "Hey, T, this is amazing. I want to learn more. Are you funded?" I think it was crazy. This was before 2008, okay? But we had a lot of confidence in ourselves and what we were doing. And Andy said, "Look, we can set up these agent agreements with telecommunications carriers." I said, "Look, I can build this spreadsheet that I have today into a website where people can manage all their inventory, and we got a business. We can get paid, and they can manage." So what we did, 9 out of 16 times, your telecom bill has an error on it. If you're an IT director for Hampton or a law firm or Kroger or any place that has multiple locations with multiple sets of services from multiple carriers, and you've got billing issues, you're paying a lot more money than you should. So we set out to solve for that, because we loaded in all the contracts and the tariffs, and then we download the bills, match it up against your inventory, and tell you if it was right or wrong. And we went and guaranteed that. But what did I say to start off with? We didn't really go test product market fit, and we didn't do a lot of the things that people teach today to ensure success more quickly. So when you don't have success quickly, and you've got payroll to meet, and you've got people working to try to solve for that, you're going to go raise capital. And we iterated and pivoted, and I think did some really good things to grow that business. But we raised Series A, B, C, D, E. And those are not always, those are some days up here, and those are some days down here. And there's a lot of fun stories all in between that I'd love to tell you about, just crazy, crazy stuff happening there. But at the end of the day, probably halfway through, Andy moved on. He wanted to go do something else. So that was a co-founder breaking up. That's like a marriage. That's tough. I brought in a guy named Trip Rackley, who is a successful entrepreneur here. He helped me recruit a team, and we continue to raise more capital. I would say, at the end of the day, I was heavily diluted, and we did a roll-up. We bought a company in Austin. We rebranded our business, and then we ended up selling to a private equity firm, and now it's called Calero, C-A-L-E-R-O, still in office here. And in between all that, Andy went and started a company called VendorMate, and worked with some of my close friends from college and baseball to go focus on that. Mark Buffington invested in that, and that was a great investment and a great return for his shareholders. And I think for me, it was always tough, because here I was fighting it out at BroadSource. I had raised a lot of the Series A and B from friends and family. I felt very tied to an outcome that would be good for them. And then, and great for Andy, right? But he was over here on this Rocket Star ship. I had Trip Rackley. I had this great management team, and we were still working hard to try to help people save money and scale and grow a business. And, there's a lot of things you learn when you do things at age 26. But there's so many lessons in there to learn, including, just as an entrepreneur, that was personally tough for me to see. And at the same time, I couldn't have been more excited for Atlanta and for my friends to see them successful. And I'm still sweating it out here trying to get that thing going in a way that it starts to really scale, And, but I think from that, and the tough times in life, you learn a lot to make things successful the next go around. I would always want to bet on someone who has had some level of challenges, because that's when you learn the most. And you know, there is no Patientco ever that exists today that doesn't go through BroadSource and the learnings I took out of that, which I think have enabled us to have a different type of success at Patientco.
Oh, that's great, and I definitely want to continue to circle back to some of those lessons learned as we move into the Patientco story. But maybe let's start there with sort of that transition of how did you even come up with the idea for Patientco?
So there's really two stories there. There was one story where at BroadSource, so we were taking in a lot of bills, auditing them, and creating process around that, and then paying those for our customers. So we take in 100 different bills, audit them, and do one checkout. They do one ACH in. We move the money to our bank account and then pay off of that, the 100 bills, and it was efficiencies. So I got learning about moving money. Also, Trip Rackley, we had some extra space in BroadSource. We took on too big of a lease. Trip started a company called Firethorn, which was basically taking your mobile phone at the time, taking online banking, which he had built a successful business in the past, and putting those together so that you have mobile banking. And I really got interested in how the money was being moved, okay? And Qualcomm, for what it's worth, in 18 months went from $0 of revenue to selling the business for $225 million in an all-cash transaction deal to Qualcomm. Amazing, right? But it was almost like, you know, as amazing as that was, right? We all want success in our own way. And so, you know, that was still tough for me personally. I mean, in a way, as a competitive person. So, but what you do is you keep finding ways to learn every single day something that's working and learn from that. And so I got really interested in how money's moved. And I remember someone who used to work for Firethorn early is a guy named Scott Voigt, who's now CEO of a company called Full Story here in Atlanta. And Scott and I in the ATDC would go off and start whiteboarding. And one thing that really got me interested, this was before Firethorn was even Firethorn, was just how money moves. I'm from the telecom area, so you're always talking about data moving and the payloads associated with bits and bytes, and how we can't move data and dollars together. And so in a very deep way, I started looking at the payments network. At BroadSource, one of our channels that referred us business was a gentleman who lived in Atlanta, and his next door neighbors had a son who was at Georgia Tech. So he knew I was Georgia Tech. He knew Joshua was really smart, bright at Georgia Tech. He said, y'all need to get together. So in Joshua's sophomore year, we did. And every weekends, we'd be down there just kind of talking through things. And we got to build a good relationship. And after about a year and a half, I started telling him about dollars and data, and how it was very interesting. And we started looking at, you know, why in the world usually does it take 1 or 2 days to move your dollars into your bank from an ACH perspective? And even more importantly, at BroadSource, I would watch our controller, and she would get all the checks in that were from people who owed us money, put them in a stack, go down to the bank, might be 10 checks for $1,000, deposit $10,000, come back with a slip, have to wait 2 days before she could reconcile that $10,000 deposit back to all the separate checks that we got. And I was like, this is crazy. There's something more efficient there. Now that sounds very engineering, right? We did start testing that this time. Joshua and I would work with different small groups and small businesses and learning a lot until we stumbled into healthcare. My brother was a lawyer for a group of doctors down south of Atlanta that ran a billing office. And we went down there. I'm an industrial engineer from Georgia Tech, so I love taking processes and streamlining them. And I saw how hard it was to move and manage a patient payment with checks as opposed to a $10,000 payment from Blue Cross Blue Shield. And at that point, I saw the problem at scale. But That's not the story I tell, okay? The story I tell is something that people can relate to more, and it's also a true story. And that story was at this same time, my wife, my new wife, was pregnant and went to Piedmont and had a child, our first child, baby girl Eleanor. We had a great clinical experience, but our financial journey was not so. I got 8 bills, some of which were from doctors I didn't understand where or who they came from. Because I didn't understand, I waited the next month and I got 8 more. Now I'm up to 16. Usually people wait 3 months. You get 8 more. You're at 24. I got 8 EOBs from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now I'm at 32 pieces of paper, and I'm still trying to figure out what the hell to do. Who's ever experienced something like that? Okay? And so I looked at it, I said, look, the only bill that's harder paying than a telecom bill is a damn healthcare bill. And people could relate and understand to that. It's a true story. And from there, we started moving the business in the right direction, moving the needle around revenue, product, customers.
Yeah, that's a great story. So moving forward from there, right, you mentioned your previous experience, we probably didn't do enough customer discovery and testing product market fit. How did you apply those lessons to sort of do the customer discovery and feel like you're getting a product market fit with Patientco?
I mean, I had a notebook, and we both went out and talked to as many people as we could, and really, I had 3 questions. I had 3 questions I wanted to answer in my mind. One, because there's lots of different nuances in how you solve this problem. Number 1, are you solving a problem? All right? That's really important. Number 2, will people pay you for that problem to solve? That's also very important. But number 3, in my mind, that I was always trying to solve for, would people pay us, and I think people forget this, will people pay you enough money to solve that problem that you can grow a business in such a way that an investor like Mark would say, that's a compelling reason for me to invest and help create scale? And those were the 3 questions I continued to ask. Now, Joshua's out there trying to think through different product enhancements and features and unique workflow challenges that we could solve problems to. And then we would meet back up and put them all together. And at some point, we decided, yep, it's time to go. The first customer wrote us a check for $7,000. And we took that $7,000, went back to, and had what we call Dev Week. And for one, we hadn't built a feature yet. We got someone to buy something before we had written 1 line of code, except for some screenshots. And we told them we'd have it delivered in 3 weeks, and we built the first version of Patientco. It's called Secure Health Pay. And in a week, we had that thing built. We got 7 folks from Georgia Tech that were graduating, went down to Chris Klaus's offices, who's a friend, and said, Chris, could we lease for 1 week? And we worked with, caffeine and Coke and pizzas until we built that first product, and then took it to the customer, and then we cashed the $7,000 check.
That's a great story. So let me go deeper on that one, because one of the things we hear from entrepreneurs a lot is, on one extreme, prove you can go sell it, because there's a lot of complexities in selling before you go build or write code. And on the other extreme, people will come by and say, I need $2 million to go build this thing, and then I'll go try and sell it. How do you think about that spectrum of what's a good way to do it?
Oh boy. So, let me just touch on the raising money, and we can spend more money on that later. But, I would tell any entrepreneur, at some point to have scale, you got to raise capital. Totally get it. I've raised $30 million. Okay, we have. But I would advise, I'd rather an entrepreneur crawl over glass than spend time raising money. And here's why. Because every hour you're spending raising money, you could spend in front of a potential customer learning, right? It's hard to get in front of investors. They're very busy. They're going to ask a lot of great questions that you don't know the answers to. If you can, spend as much time in front of a customer. So what I did different on this go-round is we didn't raise any money until we got to a 7-figure run rate. And we wrote checks on our own. And that isn't always I mean that's a hard thing to do, but I felt like when we got to a certain point, there's a lot of smart people who are looking for businesses like ours, and I'm going to spend the money building the right product and building sales. They will come find us instead of spending all my time like I did the first time trying to raise money and then trying to raise money and then trying to raise money.
So as you think about that,
Well, that answers the whole question.
well, yeah, I'll keep going with that one because that's helpful on sort of the raise side. You mentioned, hey, I wanted to wait until a 7-figure run rate. So before you get to that, how did you think about prioritizing your efforts of discovery versus sales versus engineering?
So look, this is why I have so much respect for entrepreneurs, because people will say, sometimes, that person, overnight success, or boy, and that was easy. Bullshit. Okay? I mean, it's hard work. You got to make tough decisions every single day about where you spend your money. But I really believed if we had a lack of capital, it would force us every day to spend our time in the places that we get the best return as long as we could survive. And let's face it, surviving is not fun or easy, I mean, think how hard it is for animals to survive. They're always chasing from something that can eat them, right? Or worried about disease or whatever else that's that's not a fun place to be. So, but as humans, we've kind of always survived and thrived, and I think that survival forces you to make really good decisions about how you grow your business. It's just a philosophy I have, and I think it is a key reason we were able to achieve the success we did early on.
That makes a lot of sense. And so as you're going through that journey, you mentioned product market fit earlier. How do you think about when you found product market fit, or with Patientco, what sort of triggered in your mind, yeah, we found product market fit?
Okay, here's another thing to refute common themes. We're still finding product market fit. Okay? I mean, like, our industry is changing so fast, and we've got, like in Star Wars, the Death Star, we've got Epic out there and Cerner out there, and these are these big EHRs that health systems pay hundreds of millions of dollars. And you think I'm gonna go in there and tell them what to do? We're the small fry. We've got to find a way to work inside the hundreds of millions of dollars they've already spent and invested in another IT platform. Okay, so keep that in mind, because that has implications. Epic is always going to try to be building something else that they see working, just like Amazon. If you're a retailer on Amazon and you're selling a lot and you're selling through Amazon, guess who's going to be the first one to notice it? That's right. I mean, people who are inside your network know. We met with Amex yesterday, and they're like, my God, you guys are doing a lot of business for me in the payment space. How do I help you sell more? But when you come back to the challenges we face, I mean, one of my big challenges is how can I get external to the business as much as possible to always track product market fit, because it's moving fast. There's lots of opportunities. God knows healthcare needs change, and we can do it, but we're always chasing it. Now, yeah, there are points where we had it and we looked at different markets to get to where we are today. That's a whole journey. I'm happy to share through how that went. But product market fit is something I am obsessed about, and I don't know that there's ever this one point that I say, man, we've landed and all we got to do now is just sell.
That's a great point. So let me go further into that, because as we know, healthcare is very complex in terms of you've got the payers and the physicians and the provider networks, the patients, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of different constituents, lots of niches within there, but yet to your point, you still want to build a business that has big scale. How did you think about a vision of there's this out there, but to get started, let me really tackle this constituent or this part of the problem?
So I'll give you the theory, and then I'll give you the real practicality of it. I have this saying, who doesn't want to get up and hit a home run? I mean, we all do. And we all want to make a meaningful change in healthcare and do some really powerful things that enable mankind to live and thrive better. You can't get back to baseball, you can't get to home plate without going through first base. You can't hit a double without, going through first base. You can't get to third base without touching first base. So all I really care about from a survival standpoint is how do I get to first base? If I get to first base, I'm a hell of a lot farther than most of my other folks that have tried this, and then I can figure out how to get to second or third, or maybe the next bat around, I can think about how to bat differently. All I want to do is get to first base. And so all I wanted to do was get to profitability with a gaggle of customers. It started off, where are your connections? I mean, I'm from Athens. It's a great place. My next door neighbor was a doctor. Guess who the first person I talked to was? And as you're knocking on doors, not to raise money this time, but to raise money from customers, and you're doing discovery, you're gonna run into a certain amount of people who are early adopters and want to help change healthcare and want to follow your lead if you're passionate and you believe about it, and they will. And so that turned into some checks, and that turned into customers. And at first, we went to doctor groups. Then we went to small hospitals. And let me tell you, small hospitals in Georgia, I mean, I'm talking like Metter, Georgia, Candler County, like when you see Halloween and Jason's walking through the hospital there, like it reminded me of that. These places hadn't seen renovations in 30 years, okay? And selling to those individuals. But then with a small hospital, and these were CPSI and smaller health systems that ran off these smaller EHRs. Then we moved to mid-tier hospitals. And we finally got a hospital system in Vidalia, which was on Meditech, which is Meadows Regional, the physician side to buy off. And then we went over to the hospital and said, let's connect these two, and here's our vision of one patient wallet, one bill, one payment place for all your patients. And they believed and went, and then we showed data that helped us accelerate future sales. And then one day, and this is 6-7 years in, we're continuing to look at things like LTV and CAC, and we looked at some different segments and realized, my gosh, let me even back up. One day in 2014, we decided to take on our first big hospital, and that's Roper Healthcare in Charleston. That's a 3-hospital health system. And now this is a big hospital system, and we had to go beat out functionality that McKesson had. And we said, we're only gonna do one a year, but if we do it, we're gonna make sure that they are obsessively excited about Patientco, and we make a compelling value prop that they can never leave us for. And we went and got our first hospital because we had shown execution in healthcare around different segments. And then after 2014, in 2017, we decided to focus exclusively on health systems because we could go sign up a 10-doctor practice group and have a little bit of a shorter sales cycle, but the customer service on the back end was harder and cost more than signing up Roper, longer sales cycle. But man, once we got them on our platform, product market fit really worked well there, and fewer calls coming in and more payments. And so you don't always know till you go look at the data, put it on the table, look at it, and it will inform you how to grow your business around where the market's telling you. And then at some point, 2 or 3 years later, we decided to only focus on upper-end Meditech hospitals, Epic, and Cerner health systems that are on those platforms, hospitals on those platforms. And we have never looked back ever since. But the other side of that is those folks are also buying the smaller groups. So we'd get a customer, they love us, and guess what? They get bought. Our first 2 customers right out of the gate got bought, and we lost them because someone else in another state with different vendor relationships didn't care about how well we performed. They wanted to just roll us onto the existing platform. So that's the other thing we learned too. Let's go with the people that are doing the buying, not with the people that are getting bought.
Well, great. A lot of good stuff here, Bird. Let me just, 1 or 2 more things just to wrap up, and we'll do some Q&A with the audience there. But continue to find that focus. And I love how you said product market fit continues to evolve and always chasing that, being out in front of customers where you really learn what's going on and stay in touch, right? Went out and you did raise money, close to 30 million or so over, a couple rounds there. What's sort of your focus now as you go forward?
So, I mean, we have a lot of different things going on in the business where we're trying to be very focused on listening to that market so we can outperform and out-execute. But my focus is being externally focused, okay, and listening to that market, because we've got this incredible team now that is doing some really creative, hard work. And I need to, so you're asking me personally, right, not the business. So, look, let's face it, when you get capital in your business, it's about growth, and you got to deliver on that growth. So it's about us signing up health systems. So most of my focus is signed up on that now. I absolutely care about everything that's going on in our culture. It's so important. I agree with almost everything that David writes about that. But we got to go out and get credit for the growth that we can go achieve as we continue to scale. And so I'm trying to synthesize data from marketing and strategy and sales and the voice of the customer and product across the whole business, right? Because we've got engineering and HR and compliance and all these other finance and all these areas that roll up. And so I kind of think about it from an inside outside, and how do I do two things? Number one, get this entire business focused on what's outside our four walls, not what's inside, because the customer knows what's right. Still customer discovery, always. And two, how do we create learnings? So if you're not outside and you're an engineer, you're learning just as much and can process that information and build great code that helps change the world. Learnings and externally focused, that's where my focus is for this year.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, last question here, and then open up for Q&A. Just reflecting on all your time, sort of through your whole journey, entrepreneurship within healthcare. Any other lessons learned or advice you'd want to give to the audience on, hey, you're thinking of being an entrepreneur, and specifically in healthcare? Think about this.
Oh, maybe I'll wait to Q&A, but I think if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't go any other segment. Healthcare is harder, but I think you get a longer customer, when you sign them up. So it's give and take. I don't know all the sales law metrics. They're growing like crazy, but I guarantee you they have some big leaky buckets, and that's just the nature of SaaS. You're gonna have people, you're gonna bring on a ton, and some of them are gonna roll off. Our leaky bucket is like almost zero, okay? So it's hard to get them on, but we really keep them on, and then we have great product, and they love Patientco. I would tell you I do think capital is important to scale in healthcare. So, as much as I wish all your money could come from customers, I would say raising from the right people is key, and make sure that you have good rapport with an investor so that you can talk about the good things and the bad things and really solve problems. I just want to solve a problem, and I want to do it with people who care about it, and build a team around you that is passionate, of people who really like thinking through problems, and then, give them the freedom to go solve those problems. And some of the basic things, I will tell you, I think a lot of things from Patientco I've benefited from is listening to my team, listening to our investors and sometimes the way they inform, but really listening to the customer. We have made the mistake in the earlier days that we were smarter than the customer. The customer really is fighting the problem. See if you can line up the data points and the trends and see where that's going, and listen to the customer. And then, of course, I will say this. You know what the three most important things are in growing a business? Sales, and sales, right? If you have good growth, it cures a lot of other ills. You're gonna be able to give people more meaningful work, career growth. You have a wonderful story to tell. So as much as we want sales to come to us, we gotta get out and go find that customer.
Great. Well, Bird, thank you so much. Let me open it up to the audience here. Q&A for Bird.
I was just kind of curious. You mentioned you mentioned getting more payments quicker for your, for your customers, and I can certainly imagine that that's probably what they care about most. But there's been an interesting theme with hospitals of the past probably 5-10 years, where they really seem to care about patient experience. And I know that personally, when I'm looking at 5 different healthcare bills from Emory Hospital, Emory Clinic, Piedmont, et cetera, and I look at them and I go, oh shit, it's not a Patientco bill. Now I got to figure out, from personal experience, your offering is considerably better than what we get from others. And does that translate at all into your value prop and into your sale, or do they not care about that? Is it just about more payments quicker?
Great question. So, the hard part of our business is, and around scaling it, is different people care about different things. And, we'll get into a sales cycle. We try to look for a burning problem that we're trying to solve and then expand it. But generally speaking, right, there's two-way payments. Payments work in 2 different ways. You either I'm in a billing office in a front or back office group at a hospital, and I'm taking a payment from you, or you have the right self-service tools to be able to make a payment. And so we have 2 customers, right? We've got the billing office. You could say that leads all the way up to revenue cycle and CFO, and then we've got the consumer. And that makes it very challenging, because guess who's paying our bills, right? The hospital. So we have a ton of functionality on that hospital side and continue to build out more functionality around the patient. But hospitals buy for us on a couple reasons. Yeah, they want more money, or they want a better patient experience. We all know the last touch that you have around your patient journey is the payment piece, and it's the worst. So let's change that to make that one of the best. And then there's a lot of workflow issues around taking that $25 payment. You can imagine opening up an envelope, seeing a check. What if it's written to the wrong doctor, or if it has the wrong account number? It's not paid in full. There's it's the wrong address you sent the bill out to. There's so many workflow issues that we solve for on the back end. So that's the third piece, efficiencies. And we try to build an ROI that's very straightforward on how we solve for that with their data. But that makes it challenging. What I love in a SaaS business is if you have one problem you're solving for, and then you can just pretty much create muscle memory around all the different ways that you're solving for that and scale that. Ours is more challenging, and it's also harder to deliver, because it's not just working with Cerner or Epic, but you've also got compliance and security issues, including PHI, including payments. We have to spend a lot more money than most SaaS companies are, almost from an engineering standpoint. We have double the amount of engineers, because you've got security and compliance, and you got healthcare. You got payments and healthcare. So it's challenging, but that makes our sales cycles more challenging, and we're constantly trying to solve for that.
So when you're selling to a new health system, what is the moment that you realize that they get it? Like, they're going to become a customer? Like, it's going to happen at some point before they actually sign the contract. So what is that moment? What do you think kind of gets folks over the hump? What is the piece that you show them, or information that you share, that really gets them to, like, their eyes go wide? You can see it. They see themselves with Patientco in their operation.
It's not one singular answer. Going back to almost the previous question, there are, we've got A, B, C, D. We got 6, parts to our sales cycle, and that's before we even get someone into what I call a discovery phase. There's a qualification phase that we don't even measure in our sales cycle. We're just trying to get people to talk. Once people talk, I want to try to find a problem, okay? And there's 20 different types of problems. I'm just looking for one, because it's more about solving a pain, and I have a pill that solves that problem versus a vitamin. So I'm looking for that pain. I still don't know if they're going to buy. Then, there's all sorts of, sales strategies around, BANT qualification and so forth, but I'm still trying to solve that problem. I'm trying to understand who are the buyers, how urgent, do they have budget, do I need to slice this up in smaller increments? Rarely do health systems buy everything all at once. Rarely. So I'm trying to understand that. Certainly, we try to get to a point where we would get VOC, so vendor of choice. Even then, I don't know. I have a pretty good level of confidence that someone's buying when they return my red lines. Man, I'm 95, 96% certain then. In between now and then, it can all, I mean, we've gotten all the way down the finish line and the CFO outsources, and we're talking to someone lower level. Health systems are very complicated. They are driven by a lot of different factors. They can go buy another health system and everything stops. So there's a lot of things that aren't in your control. Therefore, I solve it a different way. Because we want as many yeses as we can get to. And the main way you solve that is if you're trying to figure out predictably how much comes out the bottom of your funnel, you got to get more in the top. Okay? And then we have specific campaigns going out around specific things that we're solving for. The more you get on the top, it's a math problem. You're going to get more out the bottom, because when one moves back, you're going to have a chance of another one move forward. And that's just the reality of selling into health systems. Does that answer your question?
Hi. I've been reading a lot about pricing transparency in the healthcare system and our regulatory efforts as a country to try and solve that, and we haven't been very successful. But it seems like the reason has a lot of the same issues you're dealing with the complexity. Has pricing transparency and the drive towards that impacted your business?
Has pricing transparency impacted our business? Yeah, it's starting to be a big factor in it. You see Piedmont Hospital today, they're starting to put prices online, because Time Magazine 2 years ago had a big front page article around the charge master and how it's this bunch of wizardry, and it is to some degree. I mean, you know, you get a bill for $20,000, it says this is not a bill, do not pay, and then you're going to turn around and after insurance is paid $15,000, you got $5,000, and then you might be able to negotiate a lower rate. I mean, it is so complicated understanding that. Transparency is driven mostly by the consumer, but it's still hard. There's a company out there called Caslight Health that went public and raised bunches of money and never got the traction. It's still around to really follow through on that promise. So you have companies like here in town, Loyal Health, and they're also focused on helping generate leads to a health system to get you as a consumer plugged into Northside or Piedmont, because they want to provide a whole wealth of services to you. But the transparency is driving conversations from the back end to the front end of the customer journey, the consumer journey into healthcare. And when you're at the front end, you don't know if you go into the health system if it's $20, $200, or $2,000. So the ability to do things like estimations are key. And you see a lot of data being driven to the front end. We want to create payment modality around that. So just like a hotel, you go in to pay for Hampton, you share your credit card on the front end, but we want to give sophistication to helping people understand of what they pay before they actually pay it, and creating some controls there. But transparency is driving a lot of our business. It's forcing new entrants, like big companies like Experian and TransUnion, who typically have other data on us as consumers, to sell that to hospitals around propensity to pay modules. And so the more we know about how a person might pay, when a person might pay, why they might pay, you can tailor information to them in a way that hopefully increases the patient experience and creates loyalty so that patient comes back in again and again. So transparency is a big thing, but at the same time, I think it's still an idea, because you have so many different sets of disparate data sets in healthcare that are trapped and don't communicate to one another. It's hard to see the whole picture.
Great.
And quickly, is anybody focused on transparency here? Or moving data back and forth? I think there's a lot of opportunity in the frustration I know we see from data being not shared. So it's another promise of healthcare that needs to be delivered on, and ultimately in a free market, I don't know the time factor, but those solutions will be solved for with paying customers that are winning.
We just felt that my wife just had knee surgery, and when she went to get her MRI, I was physically calling between our insurance plan and multiple clinics because I couldn't even get straight answers of how much they were going to charge me, and you can imagine it varied tremendously.
Frustrating.
Thank you so much, Bird, for coming. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you doing this. We got some upcoming dates here that JC will show you just for our regular startup combo morning meetings with side hustles and entrepreneurs on the 23rd. And then on Wednesday, the 26th, with Greg Benoit from QGenda is going to be here as well.
He's a good one.
So, Bird, again, thank you so much. Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys coming.